When we talk about finding purpose, most people think the first step is doing something, picking a goal, setting a plan, chasing after some big dream. But the truth is, purpose isn't something you chase. It's something you uncover, and that discovery doesn't begin with motion. It begins with stillness. We live in a world that glorifies being busy. We fill every hour, every minute, trying to be productive, trying to prove we're doing something worthwhile. But purpose doesn't show up when we're running in 1,000 directions. It shows up when we slow down long enough to hear ourselves think, long enough to hear ourselves feel. And that kind of quiet, that kind of presence, it's not always comfortable. It asks us to be with ourselves, not the polished version we show the world, but the real, honest, sometimes unsure version of ourselves that lives underneath all the roles we play. That quiet, it's not empty. It's full of answers we've been too distracted to notice. Now, I'm not saying you need to disappear into the mountains or meditate on a cushion for hours a day. Stillness isn't about silence. It's about awareness. It's about creating space in your life where your own voice gets to speak louder than the noise around you. For some, that might look like journaling in the morning before the world wakes up. For others, it's taking a walk without your phone, or just sitting by a window and letting your mind breathe for a few minutes. It's in those small, quiet moments that the fog starts to lift. You begin to notice what's really been tugging at your heart, what you've been suppressing or dismissing as impractical or silly. But your soul doesn't deal in practicality. It deals in truth, and stillness helps you hear that truth before it gets buried under everyone else's expectations. We're so used to asking other people what we should do. Parents, teachers, bosses, even strangers on the internet. But rarely do we ask ourselves, what feels right to me, what feels alive? When we finally do, we often realize we've known more than we thought we did. We just needed the space to listen. Stillness is where honesty lives. It's where the voice that says this isn't it starts to whisper when you're living out someone else's dream. It's where the voice that says you're made for more begins to rise. But you've got to give it room to speak. You've got to make it a habit to check in with yourself, not just when life falls apart, but every day in little ways. Because the process of finding purpose isn't about discovering something far away. It's about remembering what's already inside you. That spark, that pull, that quiet knowing. It's been with you all along. Stillness just clears the dust so you can see it. And yes, being still can feel scary, especially when we've used busyness as a way to avoid the harder questions. But I promise you this, there is nothing inside of you that you can't face, nothing you discover in the quiet that you can't grow from. Stillness doesn't make you weaker, it makes you braver. When you start to practice stillness, when you learn how to pause before you leap, listen before you speak, and feel before you decide, you begin to move through life differently, more grounded, more open, more in tune with where you're actually being called to go. So before you run off looking for your purpose in books, in jobs, in other people's eyes, stop, be still, sit with yourself. Let your breath lead you back to you. That's where it all begins. The answers are already within you. You just need the quiet to hear them. If you really want to understand your purpose, don't just look ahead. Look back. Not to dwell, not to stay stuck, but to see with clear eyes the road you've already traveled. There's wisdom there. There's a pattern in your pain, a message in your memories, and clues in the quiet corners of your past that are trying to tell you something. Every one of us carries a story. Sometimes we think our story disqualifies us from doing something meaningful. We think the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the things we wish we could forget make us less worthy of purpose. But I'll tell you this, your story doesn't take you out of the running. It's the very thing that prepares you for the path you're meant to walk. You can't understand who you're becoming if you haven't taken time to honor who you've been. When you slow down long enough to really reflect on your life, not just the highlight reel, but the whole unfiltered truth, you start to see that nothing was wasted. That season where you felt lost, it taught you how to be strong in silence. That time you were overlooked, it taught you how to keep going without applause. The pain you endured, the questions you wrestled with, the times you wanted to give up but didn't, all of that shaped you. And sometimes, purpose shows up not in what you've achieved, but in what you've survived. Think back on the moments that cracked you open, the ones that hurt and healed you all at once. What did you learn from them? Who did you become? And who are you now because of those lessons? When you begin to trace those lines, you start to see the outline of your purpose taking form. It's not a destination you're chasing. It's a pattern you're uncovering, one thread at a time. And here's something else I've learned. The themes that repeat in your life matter. Maybe you've always found yourself drawn to certain kinds of people, certain causes, certain roles. Maybe you've always been the one to speak up, or the one to listen, or the one to hold the pieces when everything falls apart. Those patterns, they're not accidents, they're signals. Your soul keeps circling back to what it knows it's here to do. Some of us spend years trying to become someone we're not, chasing things that were never meant for us, just because they looked good on someone else. But your past, your journey, your scars, they all whisper to you about the life that is yours to live. Not someone else's idea of success, not someone else's version of happiness, yours. Sometimes the moment of clarity comes when you realize you've been running from a part of your story, hoping it would disappear. But purpose has a way of turning those very pieces, the ones you tried to hide, into gifts that serve others. When you can stand in the truth of your own journey and say, "This is where I've been, and this is what it taught me," you don't just find your purpose, you become the purpose. And let me tell you, there's power in reclaiming your narrative, not rewriting it to make it pretty, not shrinking it to make others comfortable, but owning it, all of it, because once you do, you free yourself. You no longer carry shame, you carry wisdom. You no longer ask for permission to be who you are, you walk in it. So take time to remember, go back, not to relive the pain, but to gather the lessons. Write your story down if you have to. Say it out loud. Share it with someone you trust. And as you do, watch how the pieces begin to align. Watch how the parts that felt random or broken begin to make sense. Not all at once, but enough for you to keep going. Enough for you to trust that where you've been is leading you somewhere on purpose. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to look back with honesty and compassion. There's more truth in your story than you think. Everything you've lived through has been preparing you for what you're here to do. There's something sacred about the things that light you up. You know what I mean. That little spark that flickers when you're in a moment, fully present, and something inside you says, This feels right. That feeling is not a coincidence. It's not random. It's a clue. And if you want to move toward purpose, you've got to start paying attention to what moves you. We're trained to believe purpose is only found in grand missions or noble callings, something that sounds impressive when you say it out loud. But sometimes it starts with something much simpler. What brings you joy? What draws your curiosity, even when no one is watching? What do you find yourself doing when you lose track of time? That's where you begin, not because it's flashy or profitable, but because it's honest. And purpose always begins in honesty. You don't have to have a 5-year plan. You don't need all the answers. What you need is to notice what stirs you, what opens your heart, what sharpens your focus, what gives you that quiet sense of I was made for this, even if just for a moment. It might be in the way you talk to strangers, the way you write, the way you listen. It might be in your love for stories or problem, solving or creating beauty out of nothing. Wherever that spark is, follow it. Follow it even if it doesn't make sense yet, especially if it doesn't make sense yet. Sometimes we ignore our own energy because we're busy doing what we think we should do, what makes sense, what looks good on paper. But purpose doesn't always follow logic. It follows truth, and your truth will often take you off the beaten path, because you weren't made to be a copy. You were made to be a light, and lights don't compare themselves to other lights. They just shine. You might not feel certain about your path, but energy doesn't lie. If something makes you feel alive in a world that tries to keep you numb, listen to that. That's guidance. That's direction. You don't have to be sure where it's taking you yet. You just have to be willing to follow it a little further. See where it leads. Let it unfold, one step at a time. Sometimes the things that move you aren't even big things. They're small, quiet nudges, a conversation that stays with you for days, a subject you keep returning to, a cause that makes your heart ache in the best way. Pay attention to those moments, write them down. Let them speak, because purpose doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it whispers, and if you're moving too fast, you'll miss it. It's okay to be drawn to more than one thing. You are not one-dimensional. You are allowed to be layered, to love many things, to explore many paths. Your energy is your compass, and every time you ignore it to follow someone else's map, you get further away from your own truth. So stop asking for permission to care about what you care about. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your spark before you follow it. The fact that it's yours is reason enough. When I look back on my own life, the turning points weren't always planned. They came because I followed something I loved, something that woke me up inside, and sometimes that thing didn't make sense to anybody else. But I followed it anyway, because I'd rather live with the unknown than with the regret of never trying. You don't have to see the whole path to begin. Just follow the next pull. Let your joy be the map. Let your curiosity be the guide, and trust that if something calls to you, it's for a reason. You don't have to earn the right to care. You don't need credentials to feel connected. You only need the courage to notice where your soul is leaning, and to lean with it. There's a reason why certain things stir your heart. Purpose begins there. If you want to live on purpose, you've got to know what matters to you. Not just what impresses people or looks good from the outside, but what actually sits right with your spirit. What are the things that, if you gave them up, would make you feel like you lost a part of yourself? That's where your values live, and purpose, true purpose, won't lead you anywhere that asks you to leave those behind. Sometimes we get caught up in chasing things that don't align with who we really are. We go after status, applause, security, and we might even achieve them, but still we feel hollow. That's because success without alignment feels like a lie you can't quite explain. You know something's missing even when everything looks fine. But when your life reflects your values, when your words, your choices, your actions all line up with what you truly believe, that's where peace lives. That's where purpose starts to bloom. But here's the thing, you've got to name those values for yourself. No one else can do that for you. You've got to ask, what do I stand for, even when no one's looking? What do I believe in so deeply that I'm willing to be misunderstood for it? Those aren't easy questions, but they're necessary ones, because if you don't name your values, the world will hand you a set that don't belong to you. And you'll wake up one day wondering how you ended up in a life that doesn't feel like your own. It takes courage to get that honest. It takes clarity to separate what you were taught to believe from what you truly believe. Maybe you were told to always put others first, and now you're learning that self-respect matters just as much as kindness. Maybe you were raised to value success, but your soul aches for simplicity. There is no shame in that. There is only freedom in telling the truth. Once you're clear on what your values are, you begin to navigate life differently. You start to say no to things that don't fit, not because you're being difficult, but because you're protecting your peace. You start to choose people, work, and rhythms that reflect who you really are. And that's when life starts to feel real. That's when the pieces begin to fall into place, not because you forced them, but because you finally stopped pretending. Purpose and values go hand in hand. You cannot build a life of meaning if you're living out of alignment. Because purpose isn't just about what you do. It's about how and why you do it. It's about the intention behind your actions. It's about waking up in the morning and knowing you're moving through the world in a way that reflects your deepest truths. And yes, that kind of alignment might cost you something. It might mean walking away from what's familiar. It might mean being misunderstood, even judged. But I'll tell you this, nothing is heavier than carrying a life that isn't yours. And nothing is lighter than standing in integrity with your own soul. You have to protect that alignment, guard it. Stay in conversation with yourself so you don't drift. Because it's easy to start bending your values just a little, just to fit in, just to keep the peace, just to avoid rocking the boat. But every time you betray your values, even in small ways, you drift further from purpose. And the longer you drift, the harder it becomes to recognize yourself. You deserve a life that feels right, not just looks right. And that starts with honoring what you believe in deeply, unapologetically, and without compromise. That doesn't mean you won't grow or change. You will. But your values will be your anchor, your compass. They'll hold you steady when the world tries to pull you in 100 directions. So don't be afraid to define your life by your values. Let them guide your decisions. Let them shape your relationships. Let them be the reason you walk away from what no longer fits and the reason you step boldly into what does. Because when you live in alignment, you don't just find purpose, you become it. Purpose cannot thrive where your values are silenced. So many people wait for purpose to arrive fully formed, like it's supposed to knock on the door one day and introduce itself with a name tag and a plan. But purpose doesn't show up that way. It doesn't come with guarantees or instructions. It comes through movement, through experience, through trying and failing and learning as you go. Purpose is something you grow into, and the only way to grow into it is to begin, to take a step, even when you're unsure. You don't find purpose by thinking about it forever. You find it by getting your hands in the dirt of life, by experimenting with what speaks to you, by testing out paths and paying attention to how they make you feel. And no, it won't always be a perfect fit on the first try. Sometimes you'll try something and realize this isn't it. That's okay. That's part of the process. Purpose isn't a straight line. It's a winding road, and each turn teaches you something important. We're taught to be so afraid of getting it wrong that we end up doing nothing at all. We wait until we're ready, until we're certain, until we feel qualified. But the truth is, clarity comes from doing. Confidence comes from showing up. You get closer to your purpose by living your life, not by sitting on the sidelines hoping for a sign. You have to give yourself permission to try without knowing the outcome. That means taking small steps toward what feels meaningful. It could be volunteering your time, starting a project that excites you, taking a class just because you're curious. These things may seem small, but they're not. They're how you begin to align your actions with your inner voice. They're how you start to learn what fits and what doesn't, and when something doesn't fit, that's not failure. That's feedback. That's information. Every time you try something and it doesn't feel right, you're not moving further from your purpose. You're moving closer, because now you know. Now you can adjust. That's how you refine your direction, not through perfection, but through participation. There's something powerful about being willing to get it wrong. It takes courage, it takes humility, and it takes trust. Trust that you're being led somewhere, even if you can't see the whole picture yet. You don't need the full map, just the next step. Just enough light to see the ground in front of you. That's enough, and I want to say this too. Sometimes your purpose looks different in different seasons. What was true for you 5 years ago may not be true now. That doesn't mean you were wrong then. It means you've grown. It means life has shaped you, and your purpose will shift with you. It's alive. It evolves. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to let go of what no longer fits, even if it once felt right. That's not quitting. That's wisdom. So don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for approval. Don't wait for everything to make sense. Start where you are. Start with what you know, and be open to where it leads. Sometimes the thing you thought was just a side project becomes the very work your soul came here to do. Sometimes the conversation you had in passing opens a door you never imagined, but you've got to be in motion for those moments to find you. It's not about rushing. It's about showing up with intention. It's about moving through life like you're listening for something and honoring the moments that make you feel more like yourself. It's about saying, I may not have it all figured out, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to trust the unfolding. Purpose rarely comes with certainty, but it always comes with invitation. The invitation to live awake, to live in motion, to live in alignment with your becoming. You will not figure it all out before you begin. You begin, and then you figure it out. The deeper sense of purpose often comes when we realize that it's not just about us. It's about how we connect to something greater than ourselves, something that goes beyond our own needs, desires, and ambitions. True purpose is woven into the fabric of the world around us. It lives in the service we offer to others, the ways we contribute to our communities, and the love we give, even when it's not convenient. It's in that sense of connection that we begin to understand why we're here. When we think about purpose, we often think of it as a personal journey, a quest to find meaning for ourselves, to live out our own dreams, to find our own way. But the most profound sense of fulfillment comes not from what we can take from the world, but from what we can give. We are born into this world with unique gifts and talents, and we are meant to share those gifts. We are meant to serve in our own way, and in doing so, we unlock a deeper level of satisfaction than any material success could provide. But serving others doesn't always mean grand gestures or big acts. It's often found in the smallest of moments, the quietest of actions. It's in the way you show up for the people in your life, the way you listen, the way you care, the way you create. It's in the work you do, no matter how visible or invisible, that contributes to the greater good. Service doesn't require a stage. It requires a heart willing to give, a soul open to others. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own struggles, our own challenges, that we forget the power of connecting with others. We forget how much we're capable of lifting someone else's spirit, how much a single act of kindness can ripple outward and make a difference. When we live with the awareness that our purpose is linked to something larger, to the well-being of others, we begin to see that our lives have a far-reaching impact. We are not here just for ourselves. We are here to serve, to build, to uplift, to create a legacy of love and care. But here's the thing about service. It isn't always easy. It can be challenging, exhausting even. Sometimes giving doesn't come with immediate rewards. It's not about the applause or recognition. It's about the quiet knowing that what you've done, no matter how small, has made a difference. True purpose doesn't seek validation. It seeks to give, to contribute, to leave something better than it was. Serving others doesn't mean you neglect yourself. Quite the opposite, it means recognizing that in giving, you are also receiving. When you serve with your whole heart, when you offer your gifts freely, you don't just make an impact on the world around you. You also deepen your connection with your own soul. Purpose isn't just about the work, it's about the way that work feeds you, fills you up, and makes you feel more alive. When you're serving, you're tapping into the very essence of your own humanity, your own capacity to care, to love, and to make a difference. Purpose is rooted in the recognition that we are all connected. We are part of a larger story, one that's still unfolding. The threads of our lives are intertwined with the lives of others. What we do matters not just for us, but for the world. And when we align with that larger story, when we connect to something bigger than ourselves, we tap into a deeper well of strength, of meaning, of joy. Sometimes serving doesn't look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it's in the quiet acts that no one sees, the listening ear, the helping hand, the compassion shown in times of difficulty. But it's in these moments, these small acts of service, that purpose finds its truest form. Purpose is not grandiosity. It's about presence, about showing up for others in ways that are meaningful and true. And here's something I want you to remember. You don't have to change the world in one dramatic act. You just have to show up to be present, to care. Sometimes it's enough to show up for one person in one moment with a full heart. That's where purpose starts. That's where it grows. So when you're searching for your purpose, ask yourself not just what do I want, but also what am I here to give, who can I serve, what can I contribute? When you begin to ask those questions, you begin to align with a purpose that's not just about self-fulfillment, but about becoming part of something much larger. You'll find that the more you serve others, the more you'll uncover your own deeper sense of fulfillment. You'll realize that purpose isn't something you search for, it's something you give, something you offer freely, and in doing so, you find it within yourself. Because at the end of the day, the most profound purpose we can ever find is the one that connects us to one another. That's where meaning lies, and that's where you'll find your own purpose, not just for today, but for a lifetime.